It's 1:30. I'd like to call the meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Commission for August 21st, 2023 to order. We'll go ahead and do roll call. Commissioner Varnell.
Here.
Commissioner Littlefield.
Here.
Commissioner Long. Here. Commissioner Hale.
Here, sir.
Commissioner Schuline is not available. Go to Commissioner Wynn, who's also not available, and to Commissioner George.
Here.
And Commissioner Cornett.
Here.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. Can I have a motion concerning the minutes of the July 17, 2023 meeting, please?
Motion for approval.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Varnell. Do we have a second?
Have a second.
Second by Commissioner Long. Do we have any talk about the meeting minutes? Okay, we have a motion to approve from Vernell, seconded by Long, and your votes, please.
There it goes. Just came up.
Okay, we have 5 in favor with 1 abstained, so we do have item passed. Okay, we go on now to reports from Traffic Services Division and the Counselor's Office. Mr. Chai?
All right, you've got our standard comments before you. We've got our regular monthly report on yield signs installed administratively. You've also got our unfunded signals report, which is unchanged from the previous month because there have been no additions to it. And we also have a report on, provided by both Traffic Services and by Planning Department staff on compliance, reverse angle parking compliance observations on Northwest 39th Street. As a matter of interest, when we conducted a survey earlier this month, we noticed that we had about a 58% compliance rate as far as vehicles being parked in reverse on 39th Street. And planning staff has also been conducting studies, and they noted at the bottom of their report that their May average for compliance is 58%, which matches the compliance rate that we collected in our study, which was just done a few weeks ago. And then at the tail end of today's meeting, Justin Henry with Planning Department will be making a presentation on the current draft of Bike Walk OKC. And but that's just been bumped to the end of the meeting to give the commissioners more time to talk about it, should they need to. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on any of the reports that you've received.
Anything for the staff? Okay, Counselor's Office, you got anything for us?
Nothing from the municipal counselor's office.
All right, thank you very much, sir. One item just for us up here on the horseshoe, there's a request that we verbally make motions in seconds. And then I'll say who it is, and that way it'll get into the record cleaner. Okay, thank you. We go on now to item 4, the consent docket. Is anybody here to speak against item 4A of the consent docket? Okay, do we have a motion for the consent docket?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Hale. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Cornett. Do we have any talk about the consent docket? Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent docket by Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner Cornett. Votes, please. Item has passed with all in favor. Okay, we go on now to item 5, items for individual consideration. Item 5A, no parking anytime restriction on both sides of Northwest 75th Street from Meadow Lake Drive to approximately 135 feet east of the east curb line of Meadow Lake Drive. Do we have anybody here to speak on this item? Yes, sir. If I could have your name and address, you'll have up to 5 minutes.
My name is Craig Valadez, 9100 Northwest 75th. I'm requesting this no parking. As you can see in the picture, so I am at a dead end, and it's a 5-acre property that abuts a neighborhood, and I have a 16-foot gate, and the road is slightly too narrow to have 2 vehicles, well, really any vehicle, because I usually pull in large horse trailers. I've had to call the police a couple of times. It's been quite an ordeal of not being able to exit my property. The other concern is having emergency vehicles access the property if needed. So this is why I'm making the request.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak on item 5A? Staff, you have your input?
Really, in this particular matter, the applicant has provided a neighborhood petition indicating support from residents on both sides of Northwest 75th Street to the east of Meadow Lake Drive. So he's got a petition that stands at 100% in concurrence with his request, so action will be at the discretion of the commission.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion concerning 5A?
Motion for approval?
Motion to approve 5A from Commissioner Barnell. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Littlefield. Any discussion? Okay. We have a motion to approve 5A from Commissioner Barnell, seconded by Commissioner Littlefield. Can I have your votes, please? Okay. Item has passed with all 7 in favor. Okay, we go on now to item 5B. Emily Benter, change the speed limit on Southwest 134th Street, State Highway 37, between Interstate Highway 44 and Southwestern Avenue from 50 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour. I see you're here. Can I
Yes.
have your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. My name is Emily Binter, and I live at 2220 Southwest 137th Place, and that's in South Oklahoma City. We're kind of right in between Oklahoma City, Moore, and even Norman. We're part of Moore Public Schools in that area, but our utilities and everything is through Oklahoma City itself. My husband and I have lived there for 11 years, and we're blessed with 2 children, a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And when we had moved out there, there wasn't a lot of schools and businesses and even neighborhoods, but just over the period of time that we've lived there, there's been a lot of development. I appreciate all the notes and the research that's been done looking into changing the speed limit. I got the email and really read into it a lot and read that it is considered a state highway all the way from 44 going east to 35. And I'm not really for sure. I guess probably when it was established at the time, there wasn't a whole lot out there, but so much has developed since then. And once you cross over at Santa Fe going east to 35, that's considered more, if you're not familiar with the area. And the speed limit does go down to 40 once you go further east. As soon as you hit Santa Fe, then all the way to 35 is 40. So I'm really looking just to get the same thing going back the direction to 44 now that we have so much development. If you take from Portland just to Western, we have several schools that have recently come up, so we have quite a bit of kids on school buses and just parents in cars trying to get their kids. On Portland itself, if you go a half mile north, is South Lakes Elementary. On May, there's 2 elementaries, half miles, both off 134th. One to the north is Early Wine, and one to the south is Wayland Bonds. Then on 134th itself, between Penn and Western, which is on your map, is Eastlake Elementary. And then off of Penn, going back south, half a mile is a really big new junior high, Southridge Junior High. And so also on the corner of Penn is the Moore Norman Votech, which has tons of high school students and college students, along with, I see police departments there all the time, just with different trainings, nursing facilities come in and bring, so it's very well populated, along with, we put in a library just right next to that as well. In addition to probably about 4 very large neighborhoods between May and Western itself, which is where you find us. And there's a ton of businesses. There's a Walmart, just dentist places, your general AM, PMs, auto zones, McDonald's, storage facilities, 7-Elevens, Casey's, your general run of the mill, but it really has just boomed just since we were blessed to move there 11 years ago. My reason for the letter was, I think at the time when I wrote it, which I'm not even for sure when time flies, but there was a fatality wreck right across from where we live, and there's a little memorial there. I still see kids walk up to it and place flowers just right outside of our neighborhood. It's such a high rate of speed with so many people on it. It's hard to turn in and out of so many multiple businesses and neighborhoods and schools even at different points of the day. It really makes it pretty dangerous. So I'm just, coming to the commission today asking for a reduction of speed limit, just like Moore had for 40 miles per hour. I know it still has to go to ODOT even if it passes today, but I appreciate you guys hearing me out and taking the time to consider it. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I have somebody else who signed up to talk on this item. Sir, if I could have your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Yes, my name is Porter Self, 1609 Exeter Court, Oklahoma City. I support everything Emily said. I really feel like the biggest thing is for the school buses come out of her addition. It's right before you get to Penn. That's my main worry, and they're going 50 miles an hour, and I just don't see how school buses can. And I know there's a lot, and then there's a new addition going on, 134th of May. They just leveled all the groundwork for some, it looks like condominiums. I'm not sure how many people's gonna live there, but that's just gonna be more traffic that's coming that way. Going, and then if you've ever been there at the elementary school that's actually on 134th Street, at school time, when school lets out, the people will actually block one whole lane for miles, waiting their turn to pick up their child. So really in that area at that time of day, there's only one lane on one side of the road. And there's still, well, of course, then there's the school zone, but still, if they don't stay, there's just not enough time to stop, especially like where you're coming out of hurry. The several places, they're going 50 and they're just coming out, and I just don't, I think 40 wouldn't hurt, just like she said. Just, it's that way in more city limits, and if we could just do the same thing. I appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else wanted to speak on item 5B? Okay, staff?
All right, you've got our comments before you. Just as a reminder, this item was original, there was another applicant, a gentleman named Ross Morris, who had a similar request, which was considered by the commission in October of last year. And it was a request to drop the speed limit from 50 to 40 on the same section, which is I-40, takes Southwest 134th Street from I-44 to Western Avenue. One thing that I want to interject before you get too far into this particular case, Commissioner Wynn works for ODOT, and when I sent out the meeting notices, he had shared something with me, and he let me know that ODOT at the state's Transportation Commission meeting in July voted to remove State Highway 37 from their inventory, and that takes it from I-44 to Sunny Lane. So this particular section of Southwest 134th Street is in the process of being removed from the state highway system. When that will become effective is not known just yet, but the state is working in that direction. So at some point in time, this will just be reverted to a city street. So with that aside, you've got our standard studies on volumes and speeds. One thing that we do notice is we compared speed studies that were done previously in 22 with those that we redid for this particular application, and you'll see that the 85th percentile, 85th percentile speeds are running in the neighborhood of 50 miles an hour for the 50th percentile speed and 54 for the 85th. One other note is in the section of 134th Street, which is within the city of Moore, where it's already posted 40 miles an hour, we did speed studies in that area as well, and we're running with a 50th percentile speed of 50 and an 85th percentile speed of 55. In our studies, we noticed that as far as driver compliance with the requested 40 mile an hour limit, now granted it's posted 50 currently, but right now 7% of drivers are traveling 40 on the on 134th Street between I-44 and Portland. You go to the next mile over, it's running around 1% of drivers will travel 40. Next 2 miles have about 16% of drivers traveling at 40. The 50th percentile speeds are typically running around 49 to the low 50s. There's 1 mile that's got a 50th percentile speed of 47 miles an hour. The NCHRP method that Daniel Wynn's predecessor had brought to our attention, it's NCHRP Research Report 966. It's project number 1776. It had a speed limit setting tool spreadsheet, which was created for that particular national study, and it had when we entered our data for this particular road into it, it suggested that 50 miles an hour was an appropriate speed limit for this road. And we also ran the Bella Light study on this and found that a credible speed limit for this particular roadway should be at least 43 miles per hour. That's based on metric units, which would be a 70 kilometer per hour limit. So as far as a 40 mile an hour limit goes on this particular roadway, while it is certainly possible to post it at that level, we're not, because of the nature of the built environment, it's probably not likely that we'll get very good driver compliance. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have on the application.
All right, thank you. Do we have a motion concerning item 5B?
Motion to deny.
Okay,
Now, I'll
motion,
explain that here in a minute. but-
okay, motion to deny item 5B from Commissioner Hale. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner George. All right, sir, you're up.
I'm part of Ward 5, very familiar with the street. I've talked with a number of residents, and they really want to see this 50 miles an hour. I regret that, if I remember right, and forgive me if I'm wrong, when we looked at this about a year ago, if you look at the accident record between Western and I-35, which is 40 miles an hour, the accident record showed that there were more accidents between that stretch at 40 miles an hour than there was from Western to I-44, which I thought at the time was unusual, and that's something at that point in time I don't believe we even discussed, but that's what the numbers had pointed out. I'm very familiar, and I totally agree that the school, they're on 134th, you will have cars lined up, but I wish the school would have done things differently than to have their pickup and drop-off line. They're on 134th, but that was their choice. It's for the flow of traffic. I really feel like that this needs to stay right where it's at the 50 miles an hour due to the studies and the current rate of speed which is currently being driven on that road.
Okay, anybody else want to speak on comments on 5B? The school zone markings and where they're at, because of the traffic in one lane and the amount, can they be maybe moved further, or is that something, or is there a normal distance for slowing people down in school zones?
Well, ordinarily, we try to place school zone flashers at a point where typically drivers have the opportunity to recognize it and then decelerate. In this particular case, drivers are changing from 50 miles an hour down to 25. So the longer a school zone becomes, a lot of times you run into situations where you can start having more intersections falling within the limits of the school zone, and some drivers may or may not pick up on when the school zone is in effect when they're coming out from the side streets. So we just try and confine the school zones to basically, they need to be at a location where drivers can be assured that they're going to be, we can get them slowed down in advance, and then especially if there's like a school crossing someplace in, well within the limits, want to make sure that drivers are going at an appropriate speed in the event that there's pedestrian crossing activity.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, okay. Anybody else have comments?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I struggle with this because I think this is the third time in my 4 short years on this commission that somebody's made the same request. So that just tells me it's going to keep going on until we do something. So I wish we could come up with a better alternative than just say no to everybody that walks up here.
think I would agree with that. And also, I was just going to say, like, at what point can we start pivoting toward what we want our desired behavior to be versus what we want, like what our observed behavior is? And how can we start actually making our streets, like the speed limit that people are observing, match what our desired behavior is versus us saying, oh, sorry, everybody's going 55, we can't do anything about it, because people are going to continue to do that until we do something to the street. And we're going to keep saying no time after time. So what is our solution? Because right now we don't have one.
Well, yes,
That's frustrating.
in fact, that's what drove all this extra work was people look at a road and they figure out, I think I can do this safely. And that's what they do. And then we came up with the Traffic Common program. But that's mainly for neighborhoods, through streets and that kind of thing. But what do we do on a 50-mile-an-hour road that, for a good part of it, looks like a 50-mile-an-hour road that is now changing over the last 15 years to more of an urbanish feel than a suburb feel? And how do we, because these roads were made wide, with nice curbing, with everything. Yeah, it's made to look like you should do that because that's what it was made for probably when it was built. So how do we, without putting trees in the middle of the road or some island like on 23rd Street there where you have that island and trees and all that stuff, what is a solution? Because yes, this will probably, as more people come in and more housing comes in, especially if it gets closer to 44, where that open area gets even worse, at what point or what solution is there to make it look slower? Or do we just say, here it is, here's the number, 45. You know, let's just say that we go to 45 now. And that would at least show that there's a change, put some red flags on it, new speed limit, that would make people aware. But it's not down to the 40, which is really down, because one of the studies showed 43 could be the right, 43 could be a number, so 45 would be a better number than 50. And just work our way down that road. Also thinking, what can we do in Traffic Common for bigger roads?
Yeah, Stuart, do you have any input on what your department is thinking as these areas start getting a lot more urbanized and have a lot more traffic coming through them that we do have them, obviously this is a state highway, so it has a little bit different of a feel, but like right-sizing some of these, either the clearances on either side, or what is it that we can effectively do to make these safer, to actually control speed? I know that controlling speed, you and I vary on what we think should happen with that. I think that everybody who has come before us has made a really good point of talking through why it's important that there is a slower speed on this straightaway. I would say that accident history also proves to me that there should be a slower rate of speed on this straightaway. So what's the traffic department plan, or what are you thinking in terms of actually guiding speed changes on very fast, very dangerous roads like this?
Well, in a case like this, once upon a time, Southwest 134th Street passed through mostly rural areas. And it's been, over the years, that it's been steadily developing. There's a similar situation going on now on the west side of the city along Mustang Road, which bears a State Highway 4 designation. That area is continuing to urbanize. And I'm sure at some point in time, that particular roadway will also wind up being removed from the state highway inventory. It wasn't until within the past probably maybe 10 to 15 years that Northwest Expressway was removed from the system. I take that back, not entirely removed from the system, but the entire portion of Northwest Expressway, basically from the Penn Square Mall area out to the John Kilpatrick Turnpike, has been removed from the state highway inventory. In a condition like this, you know, you can look at the mile in Moore, which is posted 40 miles an hour, and it's still, even though it's probably more heavily urbanized, its 50th and 85th percentile speeds are still running upwards like about 10 miles over the limit. So there's what you're facing with is a driver response to the built environment. And speeds in Moore may be a little bit higher because the speeds coming in from the Oklahoma City side are probably running higher because the corridor's kind of got more of a, no, I wouldn't say it's not really truly urbanized in its feel yet. However, it's getting that way. But it's, you know, towards the west end, towards I-44, it's still wide open. And so consequently, drivers are still probably responding based on what they're seeing. And so they are traveling at a higher speed. I mean, if the commission wants to consider something, it may be, at this point in time, might be a stepped approach. And you might possibly consider something as low as 45, because you can always do less than what's on the agenda. You can't take it a step greater, so you couldn't opt to post like a 35-mile-an-hour limit. But you know, you could do 40 in accordance with what the applicants requested, or you could possibly take a step and maybe go at 45. But drivers have to be educated that, you know, if there's a regulatory change, then they need to adhere to, you know, the way it's been posted. But like I said, City of Moore's got it posted 40, and they're still running faster in Moore.
Right, so I think go back to my original question, which is what are we changing within the built environment to make people adhere to a speed limit that we're comfortable with as it continues to urbanize? If we want them to travel at 45 miles an hour and we're saying throwing up a speed limit sign that says 45 miles an hour isn't going to change anything, then what are we doing similar to the ASAP program? What is your department doing? What can we do to actually make some change in the built environment that will slow down traffic versus just saying, oh, drivers don't know what they're doing and they're just going just as fast as they want to go? Like, they have to be given some kind of parameter so that we can actually.
Well, a point would be narrow in the lanes a bit and put in white poles on a white line like we do for a bike route. But just, you know, if they're
Making them thinner.
16-foot lane or whatever the right number is, and they're probably the largest that we have because it was made to flow traffic. So you have to make the lanes look like a 40-mile-an-hour lane compared to a 50-mile-an-hour lane. So it would be something like that, I mean, something visual to say, this looks pretty narrow, and oh, by the way, I got something here.
I would just really like to hear, though, if there is any consideration from the department to actually take steps in that manner, or if moving somebody from point A to point B as fast as possible is the end game. Because I think I'm fighting a different fight. I'm fighting to actually adhere to people who are requesting to slow down traffic multiple times, but we're not doing it other than offering them a speed limit change. So is there anything that the department is willing to do
Well,
actually do that?
As far as the accident record, if you look, over half the accidents that have happened here have happened at intersections which we have put signage up to try to help with the flow of traffic. But even doing that, over half the accidents on this road are at the intersection. What concerns me is, I totally agree that a road has a feel to it. And I've been on this road a number of times, and it feels like 50 miles an hour or more. So if we do cut it down to the 45 or to the 40, this is what Red used to talk about a lot. We're going to make a bunch of lawbreakers by what we do, and it's going to be very hard to force them into that because we want it slowed down. But if the drivers feel like I can safely drive it, they're going to drive the 50 miles an hour. And I think that from Western to I-35 bears that out because it's 40 miles an hour and they're doing 50.
I completely understand what everybody is saying. I am again going to ask Stuart, is there anything that the department is looking at or is willing to do to change the built environment if we actually want to slow down traffic?
Okay, to alter the built environment is literally going to take a lot more urbanization along the corridor, because there are sections of this roadway, and it doesn't matter how you would change, like, the feel of the road. Well, like the cross-section of the roadway, it can be slightly narrowed. As long as the built environment still speaks to the fact that that the driver is passing through an area where you can travel at a higher speed, they will continue to do so. This is a case that we had a number of years ago. We'd studied a street called Pebblestone Parkway. It's out in the far northwestern part of the city. It's just a 2-lane road. It's got a center median, so it's landscaped down the center median, but it's got residential development along both sides of it, but they've got basically a perimeter fence for the subdivisions abutting it. Now, even though it's posted 25, all the 85th percentile speed studies that we conducted on this roadway showed that most drivers were operating upwards of 40, and it's posted 25. So it has got a dramatically different feel than Southwest 134th Street. And if we've got a 25-mile-an-hour roadway where we're getting 85th percentile speeds over 40 miles an hour, there's probably very little that Public Works or anyone else could do to this corridor to really adjust that speed. I think the only thing that's going to change it in the future will be as it urbanizes, and there will probably be additional traffic signals that go in, maybe in conjunction with the new housing additions, possibly in conjunction with new shopping developments or something like that. It's going to be years before to most drivers, this road feels like it should be something that's traveled at a speed a lot less than what it's currently posted, or even down to something like 45 or 40. It's going to take a lot more development. Did I answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay.
Seems like the onus is still going to be on the urbanization versus the department wanting to slow down traffic on purpose.
Right, because I mean, as far as like making alterations to the roadway, a roadway narrowing project would probably be exceptionally expensive because this particular curved roadway will have a drainage system, and that drainage system will need to be modified because all the inlets will need to be adjusted. So there is no easy answer as far as making a physical change to this roadway that I know of that would have any sort of meaningful change to speed.
Well, and also you don't want to make a road that's made for a lot of traffic to now be made for not as much traffic, because you still have to flow traffic. That's still one of the areas that we have to look at, is we still have to flow traffic in and out. And yeah, I don't think we would want to actually physically change the road, but can we visibly do something? And that's something to think about maybe. I mean, or even add it to the ASAP sub work that we have as far as, because like you said, this is something that's going to keep happening over the next 20, 40, 50 years as the city grows out into the suburb area, the true suburbs of Oak City, and into the other cities that are around us. That's going to be more of a problem when these larger roads now have to slow down. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
One of the, sitting here listening and appreciating all of this, what you're asking for, part of a built environment is signage and stop bars and caution signs and what signage of what to expect ahead. I, of course, haven't driven down here. It's been years since I've been down there. Maybe you could commit to relooking at these intersections and looking at the painting and the striping, and maybe look at approaching these intersections where maybe there's signage that was once there that's now missing, that warned drivers that there's a turn signal ahead or something like that. I see one stop sign. On the cross street, I'm not sure what street that is, but maybe there's stop bars that need to be refreshed there. Maybe that kind of approach could have some impact. And of course, there's always enforcement at these intersections that might be able to curtail some of these horrid accidents. And I'm not opposed to the 45-mile-an-hour step down thought with this. I'm not opposed to considering that even today.
Well, that's a good point. And you mentioned that the state did a lot of work on this road.
State has resurfaced 134th Street, yeah. So as far as a lot of pavement marking maintenance, The roadway is in very good condition at the moment. So
Which is a
it's-
problem. We need to put a couple potholes out there, right?
Well, and so 134th maybe, but what about the perpendicular roads, the main streets? Have those markings been refreshed?
Probably just to the extent where they intersect the street. But there shouldn't be any significant improvements to either side. I mean, ODOT, when they, as part of, I guess, their preparation to transfer 134th Street to the city, they did a resurfacing project and replaced our traffic detection systems for us.
Okay. Anybody?
So-
Yes, sir.
Even if, no matter what we do today, it's still, if we do vote to change the speed limit, it's still going to go before the state until they do release it, correct?
I will have to ask that question because at this point in time, if the Highway Commission has voted to remove it from the system, even though they haven't maybe officially, it's not officially off their books yet, at that point in time, they may decide that the city's well within its right to be able
Okay.
to
Just
effect a
wanted to double
change.
check
since-
on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. Come on up, please. No, yeah, please. Come on up to the mic.
I know they're in a repaving project on 119th Street, repaving it. I know they did 104th Street the same way. I believe both roads in both sections are 40 miles an hour from the highway all the way, and maybe the police officer knows right offhand, but I believe both those streets, which are just 1 mile, 119th and 104th and 89th, all the way from the highway, are all 40 miles an hour too. And I realize they're probably a little more residential, but I realized when this was built, it was farm country and it was a highway. It's not a highway anymore. And there's a lot of people out there that's living, and we're burying them when they're having crashes. Thank you.
All right, very good point. Okay, anybody else have comments? Do you stick with your motion, or do you want to modify your motion?
Well, that was one of the reasons a lot of constituents would like to see that 50 is because over the last few years, 104th and 119th have gone down to 45 miles an hour. But this was the one stretch of road, being state highway, that you could get off on and go from 140, Highway 144 to more quickly. And that's one of the reasons they'd like to still see this remain 50 is because the other streets to the north and south have gone down in speed limits. So that's one reason they'd like to see this one stay 50.
So you're going to stick with your motion?
I am.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to disapprove item 5B from Commissioner Hale, seconded by Commissioner George. Can I have your votes, please? Okay, we have 5 in favor, 2 opposed. We have enough, so the item has passed, which means it's been disapproved. Okay, so item 5B has been disapproved. All right, we go on now to item 5C, Timothy Johnson, 3 subpoints. They'll be up on your board. There they are. Do we have somebody to speak on this, sir? If you can come up, please.
Caleb Morgan, 1 East Sheridan. We'd like to continue this item. We have scheduled a meeting with someone that has some concern about it, so that meeting is forthcoming, and we're working out some issues, so we'd like to reschedule this if we can, or defer to the next traffic commission.
Okay, thank you. Staff, anything?
Nothing to add.
Okay, so do we have a motion concerning item 5C? Motion to continue to the next Traffic Commission meeting by Commissioner Varnell. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cornett. Any discussion? And that's okay with the other side of this issue, and you guys are going to be able to work something out?
We've talked to the client that asked us to represent this, and they're okay with it, and we already have something on the book, so we're already working it out.
Right. Okay, very good.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any other talk on this item? Okay, we have a motion to move this item to the next Traffic and Transportation meeting from Commissioner Varnell, seconded by Commissioner Cornett. Time to vote. It is deferred. We're standing by. Well, I'm waiting. Am I on? Are we all waiting here? Yeah, we're waiting up here.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, 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 aye. Okay, I got all ayes up here, ma'am. And there it is. Okay, all 7, and it's passed. Thank you for your time, sir. Okay, comments from citizens. Besides the planning department, anybody else have anything that they'd like to say to us? Okay, we go up here now to traffic commissioners. Commissioner Varnell,
None from me.
Commissioner Littlefield,
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Long.
Nothing from me.
Okay, Commissioner Hale. Nothing, sir. Commissioner George.
No, not today.
And Commissioner Quinn.
I've talked a lot today, so I think you know my, my thoughts.
Okay. Captain, do you have anything?
The only thing I think it was Commissioner Shoeline that requested an extra patrol in the Heritage Hills area for some people running the stop signs. So I sent the motors guys out there. In total, for over about a 2 to 3 week period, they spent about 19 hours watching those areas and ended up making about 62 contacts. So hopefully it'll have a positive impact.
Motivation. Very good. Thank you for the feedback on that. And make sure next month you just mention to him. Great, thank you. Counselor, anything else from you? Okay, staff, anything else?
Nothing else to add.
Okay, I just have, I'm not available next month, and Commissioner Varnell is not available next month. So everybody else think you're going to be able to be here so we can have a quorum? Okay, very good. All right, so that's all the business up here, and now it's the planning. So if you can introduce yourself, and off you go.
Sure, thank you very much. Justin Henry with the City Planning Department. Here to present you today about Bike Walk OKC and how it's been updated. This was a long process, a little over 2 years. I want to particularly thank Commissioner Littlefield and Shoeline for serving on our advisory committee. And then my staff as well, Max Harris and Sasha McCrone, who really did the bulk of the work that you're going to see today. It's a long document. I'm going to kind of fly through a little bit, so please stop me if you have any particular questions. This first map is just an example of one of many maps we made regarding requests that we got. Our office kind of catalogs all the sidewalk and bike requests that we get year-round and kind of develop these request maps. Also, we included some spots from the advisory committee as well on there. So as part of the process, there was a bit of a delay when my predecessor left, and then Sasha and I were hired in the winter of 2021. We did a lot of public surveying and data collection, a lot of analysis. You'll see that there's a lot of new sidewalks, new pedestrian priority areas in here. We made a lot of revisions to our bike lanes and trails, and so I'm going to kind of touch on a lot of that. But then we've just recently made our final advisory committee meeting, and we're going into the public process where we'll go through this committee, planning department, or the planning commission, and then city council. Something to note, since Bike Walk OKC was adopted in 2018, we've had a lot of new facilities built. We've more than doubled the miles of bike lanes on street by adding another 9.5 miles. There's several more projects in the works that you'll be seeing over the next couple months as you're coming to this commission. We're also, let me go back for just one. Might particularly call out sidewalks. The city's added 176 miles of sidewalks since 2018 when this was adopted. Now, a lot of those came through new developments, but the city also has really focused on this with Better Street, Safer City, and Maps 4 getting started. All right.
Wait,
Sure.
Just go back. When you say new sidewalks in the new development areas, like new housing areas, you mean, or?
Yeah, so this is just citywide, all new sidewalks. It's a combination of new developments and city-driven projects.
Okay, but the ones in the new housing areas, does the builder pay for it, or do we pay for the sidewalk?
Right, we require the builder pay for the sidewalks and the new developments.
And that counts in those numbers. So,
Yep.
so the city didn't build 176 miles. We asked builders to do it also.
Right,
Okay.
agreed, yeah. And so specifically, like, the city used $24 million of the Better Street, Safer City sales tax to a lot of mileage. That got a lot of miles on the street, but this is reflecting kind of both categories.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Right, and then some new metrics that we're adding this year are specifically related to safety. Something that we've seen a really good increase in from the original metrics established is access to sidewalks and bike lanes and trails. But what we've also seen a lot of is really a big jump in fatalities, especially among pedestrians. This is a nationwide trend. The U.S. is at a 40-year high in pedestrian fatalities. It's largely to do with speeds along arterial streets. It's kind of been a theme today. And so this is something that Bike Walk kind of really gets into more this time about doubling down on some safety improvements. So one of this term that you've heard me use a little bit is pedestrian priority area. It's one of the ways that Bike Walk is built. We kind of find neighborhoods that are fairly close to being achieving a level of walkability with some implementation of additional sidewalks can get there. And that has to do with kind of the mix of uses that they already have in. People have a place that they can already walk. And so we focus on some of those areas kind of first. And then you'll see we also have another category, well, actually 4 other categories of additional pedestrian improvements where we do things like street enhancements, access to transit, schools, and parks. I'll touch on each of those briefly. So pedestrian priority areas, this was the original 10 priority areas that were established in the 2018 version of Bike Walk OKC. And you'll see that we've touched these up a little bit. They're largely the same as they were before, but we have gone through and added some new elements. One of the things that you'll see back on that last map is like the gold sidewalks there are funded. The red are our next biggest priority, where we're really kind of focusing on arterials and collectors before we do the neighborhood streets that are there in green. And then here's another map with the new 10 PPA. So you can see we're really kind of filling out a lot of the areas around the originals, kind of getting to those next neighborhoods. Optimistic that this could help drive a lot of sidewalk decision making in MAPS 4 and the next GeoBond issue that's coming up. Thanks. And here's a little bit of an example of one of those PPAs and how it kind of differs from the original. The maps in here you'll see we have a lot more context where you can see the black lines for existing sidewalks. Now we're really trying to fill in those gaps and make the important connections. Blue for schools, green for parks, and those yellow circles are bus stops. So those are some of the driving elements that we're trying to make those connections. But each of these PPAs was a long process of us really deciding on which sidewalks to put in. Here's another example on kind of the south side, where we're kind of growing out from the PPAs that were already near the Capitol Hill neighborhood to the east and trying to make a lot of those important connections. Then some of our other categories, street enhancements and placemaking. This is really for areas that have established sidewalks where we're going to that next level of putting in those other things that can make an area walkable, like street trees, public art, better lighting systems, things like that. And then access to transit, parks, and schools are another thing we'll see some. So street enhancements, here's just a little sampling of these are from various projects around the city where we're doing a lot of these street enhancement projects. We have about 10 or 12 of these going in various states of design or construction in most of our commercial districts. So 39th Street that we've talked about a lot in this commission, there's an example there of that. And then you're probably aware that the part of Harvey that's being pedestrianized in front of the church in Capitol Hill, that's kind of an example there. So this is a new element added to Bike Walk this year where we really kind of touch on a little bit more prescriptive about which areas have been serviced with these street enhancements, which are kind of the next in line to get this additional treatment. And then we're working with Downtown OKC Inc. to identify more downtown improvements as well. One of our other big changes was we really revamped the way we did transit beforehand. Bike Walk really prioritized a little bit of sidewalks around various stops, but this really calls for all transit lines to have sidewalks on both sides of the street along these arterial streets. They tend to be ones that already have lots of multifamily dwellings and stuff as well, and so really trying to get out into those other parts of the wards. Also, our top 20 school projects outside of our pedestrian priority areas. You see we've identified a lot of those. All these were based on metrics revolving things like amount of households with access to more than one vehicle. Those got a little bit of a lower score. And so as we kind of worked backwards from that and a lot of demographic information, we figured out which neighborhoods would have the highest pedestrian activity. So. And then one as well for our top 20 parks outside as well, identifying those locations to get sidewalks as well. Then I'll quickly touch on bikes and trails. As you're all probably familiar now, we have 3 tiers of bike facilities that Tier 1 is our protected. We've currently only separated those typically with like striping and bollards, but we're wanting to explore some new separation types. We've got a couple of those projects in the work. We're excited to bring those to you. And then Tier 2 is on-street bike lanes, and then Tier 3 is shared routes. But as we've started implementing these, one of the big lessons learned is that they almost always need to come with some kind of traffic calming elements. So we're ended up spending a lot of our time on these SHAROs, as they're called, really trying to figure out what traffic calming we can program in with them to make them work. And this ASAP program has been a good guideline for us too, is we're looking at all of those elements for inclusion on those routes. Trails, here's 3 different kinds of trails. We've kind of added that new one as a new category in the middle there because this is what we're kind of building a lot of. Multi-use trails that kind of can service bike and ped needs, usually all beside arterial streets. They have the advantage of giving the bike somewhere safe to be on streets where they're too busy and congested for us to kind of put on-street facilities. All right, and then, so here's just a map. There's a bunch of these in Bike Walk OKC where we break the city into parts and really show you all the different elements. One of the things we've kind of done a little differently there is that we've taken all the existing facilities and kind of colored them as to what tiers they should be, so you can get a more holistic picture of what the maps will look like. And it's all still kind of based around these 2 main core elements we have of crosstown connections, which is the kind of north, south, east, west line you see there, and then the Grand Boulevard Loop, which is kind of finally coming to completion with a Deep Fork Trail being built. And so those are kind of 2 core elements we build the rest of the bike network into. And then here's another map of our prioritized trail list. You can see it's a very long list. It'll take a while to get all of these funded, but we're optimistic that we'll continue to kind of make progress on these, working with the Parks Department. We also call for a few additional bike pedestrian bridges, although most of these circles, you can see there's 2 different colors. A lot of them are just adding a bike pedestrian element to an existing bridge. So, and then some lessons learned and new best practices. We want to explore more ways of protecting bike facilities besides just the little bollards that are on the street. So those are some examples around, go back for just a second. Go back for a second. Yeah. The one on the top left, you should see something on soon. We're going to be coming to you with the Lottie bike lanes, which will be the city's first parking protected bike lanes. We've been doing some experimentation and some pilot projects with the armadillos or bumblebees, as you might call them, that kind of separate. Those are good because they allow emergency vehicles to kind of straddle and get around on narrow streets. And then we'll look at things like planters in some of our commercial districts where we could have a partner that could help with operations and maintenance. All right, so another big lesson learned for us has been bike lanes versus parking, and this is where you all have seen us a few times. Something that we've really learned a lot about is that to build a lot more time into our design process of this, figuring out the parking situation and the changes to it ends up being the majority of the time we have to spend on working with the commercial districts, working with the neighborhoods, working with traffic management on really figuring out how to make those work appropriately. And then we also have a little section on tackling marginal facilities. There's spots where we built bike lanes that, this is an example of one that kind of straddles a gutter pan, and it's got a lip right there, and it becomes really difficult to ride on because the cycle is kind of hitting that little bit of a lip there. And then another element we're seeing a lot of requests for is more sidewalks on the major arterial streets outside of the pedestrian priority areas. That's something we want to continue to explore a lot in our upcoming Vision Zero plan and in grant opportunities that we have. Another thing that you might be curious about, we have called for some changes on micromobility. You all have probably, if you've been downtown recently, seen the situation like in the bottom left where scooters are cluttering up the sidewalk and making it fairly impassable. We'd like to explore some opportunities to do some small striping changes, especially maybe in some gored out areas of the street where you have striping that you can't do parking, and maybe put some scooter locations like that. All right, and then again, I've talked a little bit about safe systems and design focus. I might pause here for just a second, let you kind of read those charts. But something we're seeing is really high pedestrian fatalities among minority and poor communities. Some more safety elements that we're going to continue to explore, looking for ways we can kind of build on our LPIs and do good pedestrian signaling in our downtown areas. Places where we can do more access management as part of our street enhancements. You can see there in the top right, there's an example of just an extra lane and an extra driveway, how many extra conflict points you get, and it really creates a lot of problems. And then the bottom two examples are stuff that we're seeing in a lot of other Vision Zero cities where they're adding little safety elements to make streets more crossable. All right, and then our next steps, we're doing draft plan and public update, traffic commission today. We'll be going to planning commission next month, and then to city council for adoption. Happy to, and I think one more. I might just again plug, these are some of our next steps for the planning services. I've mentioned Vision Zero a couple times, but that's our next big effort. We just went out for RFP, and that's just closed, so we're in consultant selection now, but the city won $1 million grant to do a study of our high injury network, which would be establishing which of our streets are most dangerous, and then figuring out what kind of countermeasures we can deploy on those streets to make them safer. So look forward to presenting to you all more about that in the future.
All right, I'll just start with a few things. Have you had any feedback so far from, because I saw that you put it out a few weeks ago for input?
Yeah.
Have you had some?
Last I looked, I think we've gotten about 75 comments online, and then we made the mistake of putting it on the same page. It also has our email, so we've also gotten lots of emails individually as well. So
Okay.
yeah, getting a good set of comments back.
Okay, and then when we all did the first bike plan, we were very concerned about drivers and their lack of knowledge that they need to share the road with walkers and bikers. And one of the pieces that we asked for was a big media campaign. Of course, there hasn't been anything since then, but it took like a year and a half to 2 years, and they had flyers, and they did TV commercials and all that.
Yeah.
Is there any thought about taking some money and doing some more of that?
Sure, yeah. We partner with ACOG, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, to do Watch For Me OK. We started that with a grant from the state, and we want to continue to do that partnership. ACOG's recently hired a dedicated staff member to just help keep that campaign going. We've also are going to partner with our public information office and do a page just kind of explaining the rules of bike routes. And one of the things we're talking about doing is with each new facility we roll out, kind of linking back to this webpage that really explains how bike lanes work, what you are and aren't allowed to do with them, and trying to help get that message out there. But really the best form of education on this will be exposure. As people see bike lanes more, as they drive around them more, it gets a little bit more comfortable. I like to compare it to like a roundabout. The first time someone drives through a roundabout, a lot of times they get confused, but the more you have exposure to it, the more you drive through one of those, it becomes more comfortable.
Well, it's just the one key point out of this briefing that I pulled off of it was, as we have increased bike lanes and walk-in and all this stuff, we see an increase in the amount of injuries and accidents. Besides education, what do you pull out of those facts merging up?
Yeah, I think the public is getting a bit of a message that we're trying to be more bike friendly. I would note that I don't think we've seen any of our bike accidents on a road with a protected facility, or at least nothing that's been fatal. And so as we're rolling out the facilities, we're still seeing a lot of bike accidents, but they typically tend to be on streets without any kind of built facilities yet. So we do need to do more public education for sure, but I do think the facilities are having an intended safety effect. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am?
I was just wondering if there's anything, are you working with ACOG, or is there anything in the plan for along our bike lanes, along our bike routes, to have any kind of like bike parking that's involved? I know there was multimodal parking spaces, but I think that's the thing that I struggle the most with riding my bike, is like finding a place to actually lock it up that's not a street sign, which doesn't feel super safe.
That's a good question, yeah. The planning department did do a grant a few years ago with ACOG where they, through CMAQ, which is basically an air quality mitigation grant program, and we installed some more bike racks all around downtown. You might see like an OKC sticker on some of the bike racks. We could definitely look at more options for doing some more things like that as well, kind of expanding it out to maybe the next rung of like street enhancements and things. That's also a thing, is we could try to require it more in some of our street enhancement projects that we're actively pushing as well.
There are some instances where, just like we require handicap parking, there's also a requirement for bicycle parking in some of our maybe our planning friends can
Yeah.
look into that a little bit more.
And I believe we already do have an exception in our subdivision regulations where you can get a small offset in your parking requirement if you build bicycle parking. So
Wonderful.
that's nice, yeah.
Great.
Okay, anybody else have comments? Yes, sir.
How are sidewalks that have been proposed or asked for, that were on your map that you showed the very first map, prioritized?
So this approach is a little different. Really, we're doing arterials first, then collectors, then neighborhoods. It's a little simpler than last time, but really feeling like those arterial streets that have the most traffic and the most speed are really the spots where we need to go first. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to sort of ditto what Chairman Kula brought up about education. It's my brain's kind of been in a fog the past few weeks, but I did take some time and I looked up the Oklahoma driver's test. What's required of a person to get a driver's license in the state of Oklahoma. And it's not much different than like 1972 when I learned how to drive, and there's really nothing in that about, you know, you're on Western Avenue and you're in a vehicle and you're headed southbound and you're at 23rd Street, and right next to you on the right is some green paint and some little pillars there. And there's somebody coming across there on a bicycle and the light is green and you want to turn right. There's nothing that educates anybody on what they're supposed to do there.
Yeah.
And I still think that is a very important part of this entire deal. Is I appreciate, I probably won't get it right, but what you said about, you know, people will get conditioned to it, people will learn how it works, you know, like a traffic circle. But boy, I'd hate to be the one on a bike at 23rd and Western Avenue and take that chance with the car that's next to me that is turning right. So I think, I don't know where we would ever be with what the state, it would take the state legislature to get involved in doing some changes on driver's education, the driver's test.
I do think one of the elements there, and Stuart can probably speak to this more, but the delay in the update of the MUTCD is having all these downstream effects. Like even just green paint is still just provisionally approved by MUTCD, and so we're getting special permission to do all these bike facilities that you see nationwide now. But the MUTCD being so overdue means that it's nothing of the new rules are being folded into driver's tests or state campaigns and things like that yet, and so that really needs to be done soon. I might note the EJA law required that it be done by May of this year. Still isn't done. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else over here? Anything? Questions, comments? All right. Very good. Thank you.
Justin, I do have one question.
Here we go. Staff, sorry.
There we go. I just want to make note that in the memo that is included in Section 3 of your agenda, there is a link to the draft document for Bike Walk OKC, and there's also a link underneath that which will allow you to submit comments on the 4 sections or 4 chapters that they've got in it.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Justin, when is the the last date that comments can be submitted?
I believe it is September 15th, right? Yeah, September 15th.
Okay, so I'd encourage you all to take a look at it and submit comments if there's any things that you see. And to your question or your comments on the driver's manual, the driver's manual does not yet include a reference to for new drivers to as far as how to respond to a flashing yellow arrow. That is still not in the manual yet.
Okay. We've gone through all the items. Is there any other business for the Traffic Commission? All right, we're adjourned.